Okay, hold on. So you're telling me that you prefer Weaver to Richtofen?
Yeah, actually, I do. I think Richtofen's super overplayed. He's been well explored over the past 10 years. So I'm really hyped to see what they're gonna do with Weaver.
Okay, and so you've been playing for 10 years, right? Like you have seen Richtofen in all his glory. Like you're not like a new Zombies fan, and you still feel that way.
Yeah, I've been playing since 2010, and I'm super all in on the new stuff right now.
Okay, all in. Okay, so Liberty Balls as well.
Yeah, I think I know there's still a lot to see about Liberty Falls. I think that the gameplay was really cool. I enjoyed it as a Cold War fan, so I'm really excited to get my hands on it and give my opinion on it when it comes out.
Okay, we gotta dive into this. I gotta double click and zoom in, or whatever the expression is right now, because I feel like this is such a different take to 99.9% of what I've been seeing online. Who knows whether the sort of normie audience in the background actually feels this way or another way, or whatever way, right? But let's just start at the beginning for a moment. Who are you?
Hello. Oh my god. Hello there, fellow zombie slayers. My name is Stanley557. I've been playing zombies since I was 10 years old, and I have fallen in love with the series ever since. I have been super in-depth in the videos. I used to watch people like you, Milo. I used to watch Dalek videos back in the day. So I think it's really cool to be able to make content. I love reviewing these games. I've got like videos that are over 4 hours long on IW, 3 hours long on Cold War.
Damn.
And
you an
I'm super pumped.
IW fan? An IW defender? Yeah?
The entire 4-hour video basically came out to me saying, I like IW, but it's a very flawed game.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Fair. Okay, a balanced take. We love that. A balanced king. Good stuff. So you have been making zombies videos for a while, and the reason I actually sort of saw your tweets in my feed a couple of weeks ago is that obviously all the Liberty Falls stuff was going on, and there was all the sort of drama, if you want to call it drama. I think it was just generally people voicing their opinions. And I saw a tweet from you that was like, guys, actually, I think this just looks fine. I think it looks good. And then I think the next day, maybe, you tweeted again being like, I just woke up and watched some gameplay, or maybe I'm mixing it up with someone else, but I think you said something like this, like, I just woke up, I took another look at the gameplay, and you know what? I'm really getting excited. Like, this looks really cool. So talk to me about what you're seeing in Liberty Falls that you feel like maybe some people are missing. I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just watching Dalek's gameplay again. I was watching the trailers and the intro cutscenes again. I was at work. I had it on in the background. And I don't know. It's the way that they designed their trailers. It's the way that the gameplay was looking. I think it looks super fun. I think that, like, the game is most likely going to be just like Cold War, which if you're not a fan of that, I totally understand that not being the case for some people, where they don't like this aesthetic, they don't like the gameplay style, they want to go back to older zombies, which is totally fair. I'm a big just embracing this new stuff. I think I had a blast with Cold War, reviewed that game super in depth, and to get more of that is something that makes me excited.
Okay, hell yeah. So let's explore that in a little more detail in sort of a variety of areas, right? Because I think the internet right now is very much kind of concretely against Liberty Falls, and then sort of neutral, maybe I would say, about Terminus. Like, we haven't seen live gameplay, so it's a little harder to sort of rate it. But what I think we could do that might be quite interesting for this podcast is we can use your sort of stance on Liberty Falls and maybe the game in general as just a little bit of a temperature check and a little bit of or not temperature check, what's the word I'm looking for here? A little bit of like a devil's advocate, if you will, to some of those negative opinions or critical opinions that people have of the game. And we can just try and feel out like, okay, hold on. Have people gone too far in their critique? Maybe there's actually a lot of good here that we're missing. Or maybe you're just crazy, man. One of the two. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Okay.
I guess we'll start off there. I am most definitely insane about zombies. I own all the stuff for the game. I own the ray gun memorabilia. I have a Kraken from Voyage of Despair that was 3D printed. I'm an absolute Sika fan. I don't play any other games. This is seriously the main thing that I play.
Okay.
And I spend hours reviewing these games, analyzing them, making videos on them. I think this series is a ton of fun. It has a ton of potential, and I love looking at the new experimental ideas that Treyarch gets every couple of years, where Outbreak was cool. MWZ, despite how flawed that is, I think was a really interesting experiment, even though it cost $70. I think there's a lot of good to take out of Vanguard. I think there's a lot of good to take out of Advanced Warfare, IW, World War II, BO4, BO3. I think a lot of people overlook a lot of the really good ideas in this series, and people are very quick to judge about stuff. Everyone's very reactionary.
Okay, myself included. I put myself in that camp for sure. I'd like to take a quick detour here. There's a lot of good in Vanguard. Can we just explore? Give me a high level.
Maybe not a lot of good.
Okay.
I think it utilizes the IW engine very well. I think the aesthetics of that game look beautiful. I think Chord Effects and the Dark Aether Gods are a really cool idea. I'm a massive fan of Chaos, so to see something like that be reintroduced into the narrative, I think is really cool. I think the Covenant system is a really good idea because they've been trying to do roguelite, switching up your gameplay for years. Cold War, the big thing was the mystery box. You would hit the box, you get randomized attachments. Later on in the game, they would get better. You get more attachments per rarity. Then they kind of dropped that with the loadout system, with the blueprint system that you can apply to your weapon. So, and then they tried the Altar and the Covenants in Vanguard, which I thought was an interesting take, where you get these World War II mods that you can put on your character, and that gives you wildly different abilities. Obviously, there need to be way more. I think there's only 18 by the end of Vanguard's lifespan. Yeah. So it's a good launch pad to try something, to try that again, which I think is what Gobblegums basically are at times. Or
Fair.
Augments, too. Augments are super cool.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we can use that into a segue towards, I was going to say Cold War, but it's Cold War 2. So we can use it as a segue, but I have to say, I agree in spirit, I think. I think the problem is an idea that is cool in theory, but not realized in practice for me. So like, I would argue that the Covenant system is an example of that. Cool idea, but it never comes together on screen. To me, that is, it's a bad idea until it's proven to be a good idea almost. Like, you can think that it could be cool down the road for as long as you want, but if what you're seeing on screen in the gameplay is just like, it's not there yet, guys. It's not there yet, guys. Still a bit shaky. My perspective, which I guess is like quite a nice sort of contrast here, because you've got the optimist's view, I have the pessimist's view in this case. I've got more of the sort of cynicism in me. I'm an old man, maybe, I don't know. But I looked at that system and I was like, this just doesn't work. But the thing that I actually was more sad about with that system in Vanguard is that it was such a misstep in the way that they implemented it that I worried that would mean that in the future, Treyarch would conflate our dislike of that system with the dislike of the idea. And I think that would be a real loss for zombies if Treyarch evaluated what happened in Vanguard and went, well, we can never do a Covenant system again because Covenants clearly are bad. And it's like, well, hold on. Let's make sure that we understand what we're critiquing. I'm critiquing what I'm seeing on my screen. I'm critiquing the way this has been implemented. And I think that there's room to say, yeah, and that means it's just a bad idea. But maybe an augment style system is a solution where you can kind of get a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and you can mix it together and it can be a good thing. Who knows?
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. I feel that same way about the decisions that Treyarch makes. Sometimes I hope that they don't look at something that's perceived badly and then they drop it. Treyarch's really good about picking up old ideas and trying them again. Jet Gun's a good example. The health system in BO4 is a really good example. They were really struggling to come up with ways to get rid of Jug, but give it back to you. And at launch, you had 150 health and you went down to a Tiger instantly.
Yep.
They then nerfed the Tigers. They gave you 200 health. And then in Cold War, they took that idea. They didn't say people didn't like that, but instead what they said was, oh, for the first 10 rounds, 11 rounds, you're only going to take 30 damage. So you have Jug for that early game, so you're not punished as much for a casual trying to survive for the first 10 rounds.
So let's talk about this then. So I personally am very strongly, from a design perspective, very strongly against any system where a zombie on one round would do a different amount of damage to a zombie on another round. Like, to me, it's poor design language in terms of the way that you even convey that to a player, for the zombie itself to look the exact same, and for its attack animation to be the exact same, and for the clothes it's wearing to be the exact same, etc. And the only reason it's doing more damage is because somewhere else on the screen that is not attached to the zombie, which is the round counter in this case, it's a higher number, and therefore the zombie does more. I think that that's just poor design. But
that's a good point. I never thought about that because I like that system, but I
Yeah.
totally agree. Now that you say that, there should definitely be a way to indicate that, whether it be, which they tried to. I mean, in some ways, zombies get armor, but not every zombie gets armor, though.
Yep.
Because there's a visual variety to the zombies, so they don't want to do that. That's a really good point. I never thought about, though.
And so the armor conveys something as well, which is good. I would always give them props for that. The fact that like some zombies are armored and it isn't just for show. The armor actually does something, right? Like it's meaningful. And I would want a similar in-game indication, like make it part of the design instead of like you just have to know that you're around 40 now, and so the zombie is going to do 40 damage instead of 18 damage that it does at round 3. Like, if that was there in the game, I'd be like, oh, okay, I can get behind it a little bit more. But as it stands, it's like, it's too much breaking the emotion of gameplay and a bit more just an understanding of like playing a game. I feel like it's a sort of difference there. But anyhow, I digress. Cold War introduced a whole load of systems like that were absolutely, categorically, nobody can deny, intended to be smoothing out kinks in the zombies gameplay process and rhythm and cadence, etc., that had existed for like 10 years, right? And it sounds like you're generally a big fan of all those things. Is that correct?
Yes. I think it's a very reactionary game to BO4. A lot of decisions that were made in BO4 where it all kind of blew up in their faces. And they went back to the drawing board and they go, how do we redesign this with better intentions in mind? Because you can't just change things for the sake of change.
Right.
You have to have a reason behind them.
And
even if some of the reasons are justified, they don't always land.
For sure. So let's use our knowledge of the fact that Cold War is more or less very, very heavy inspiration for Black Ops 6. Like there's no denying that this game is very clearly a sequel, right, to that game.
Yeah.
What do you think some of the best changes that they made were in Cold War, just so we can sort of anchor that and then talk about how they've been maybe slightly modulated or slightly redesigned in places in Black Ops 6. But let's start with Cold War.
Ooh, okay. So I think everything that I have to say positive about Cold War comes with a downside too. I think
Interesting.
So I think having more ranged enemies, I think having more exciting gameplay. I know for a lot of people don't like that. It gets old when you have like Manglers always on screen, Tempest always on screen, Plague Hounds, but I like that very chaotic gameplay. In Forsaken, I think the Ludo narrative is really cool where it's almost as if the Forsaken's entire army is going after you, as there's like 9 different enemy types on that map. But at the same time, none of them are cohesively the same. Everything feels like it's from different maps. It's like Revelations, but done slightly wrong. The enemy roster doesn't fit together. The Keeper's Furies and the Apothecan's Furies and the Margwas and Revelations, that's an Apothecan army. Whereas in Forsaken, the Dark Aether's army is like zombies, Tempests, Manglers, Plague Hounds, Tormentors, Abominations. They don't all cohesively fit together, even if they're a mishmashed army. Even though I think the idea of that's cool.
Yeah, that's a fun point. I want to give you like a devil's advocate just to see what you think of it. Do you feel like the Aether overall, like the Aether story and Apothecons and Keepers and blah, 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 do you think that overall, the way they sort of established the magic of that universe was more cohesive, let's say, within the camps of Keepers and Apothecons and like that, those being the tribes, right? Do you think that was more cohesive, not by accident, but actually by intention? Do you think that it was almost this sort of structured look at magic in the Aether story, and then maybe in the Dark Aether story, it's intended to be a less structured look because it's broken down, it's the Dark Aether, it's like the worst case scenario almost of stuff that's just in this alternate world that's just bubbling around and it doesn't really make sense, and there isn't one through line where one enemy type or one enemy faction or one enemy tribe started out a bajillion years ago and then descended down into sort of different variants of one same enemy race or whatever you want to call it. Do you feel like there could be desire for Treyarch to actually be leaning into that as opposed to it just being like a flaw? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think by proxy, BO3 does a better job. I think a cohesive enemy line makes more sense. But they also didn't do the best job as this is also their style too. In BO3, every map is trying something new. Every map's in a different location.
Yeah,
It feels like by Revelations, they almost forgot that they were supposed to do something with the Apothicon, so they just drag them all into the last map.
fair.
Because
Honestly,
also
fair.
in that map, you also have spiders. You have the parasites too. Which might not be as cohesive to that very Apothicon army, even if the parasites come from the Margwas.
Yeah.
You have panzers in there too, which do not fit at all, just for the sake of having a panzer sold out, which is cool. But that's very Forsaken-esque, where it's just, let's just pull everything at the wall and just start doing it, even if those 3 core enemies that are all Apothicons are really cool.
Okay, so maybe there's a little bit of sort of friction or imperfection in both. Even the King BO3 can have some flaws to it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I think with their design team in mind, they really don't want to do a full like through line army. They really want to like keep surprising players, even if that kind of ruins the overall consistency of what beings they all are.
Yeah.
Because they really want to keep like in Liberty Falls, you have abominations, for example. Like that's something I didn't think manglers are back too. I didn't think they were going to do that. I thought they were just going to be zombies and maybe one other enemy type. But there's vermin from Terminus, which don't really fit on the map. You have manglers, which don't fit on the map, and abominations, which don't fit on the map. They really want to try and surprise you, but that also loses some of the cohesion.
Yeah, although I feel like the abomination to me on that map, I don't know why I feel this way, but it feels like that is the most sort of fitting enemy of all for Liberty Falls, just because when I think of abominations, I think of I think of them like a rhinoceros, and they just sort of charge around, right? And that's kind of their primary goal, is just to basically bang into stuff. And I feel like there's no better an enemy type to put into a small town, which otherwise also might feel too open, because it is so open. But I feel like the abomination is a really good gap closer, and something that just generally makes you recognize, like, yeah, sure, there's 20 zombies on screen here who I don't care about, but there is still this rhinoceros that's ready to charge up behind me that I kind of got to sort of keep my wits about me for, right? So I feel like almost its contrast to the town itself, and its contrast to the sort of quiet vibe and the very sort of human area maybe actually works. I don't know what you think about that.
No, that's a good point. I never thought of it like a rhinoceros fitting into the gameplay style. That's a really good point. I like to think of it more like a dissonance style. Shadows of Evil is a very normal-looking town, but you have all these Cthulhian monsters. They love doing their opposites. Gorod Krovi is fantasy versus future. Maurer Toten is very like sci-fi heavy plus magic heavy. You have the Krasny, you have the Disciple, you have Valentina. They love doing their very like, let's take something that's one style and then throwing another style into it.
Yeah, that's a really cool observation, actually. Thinking about a map like Mauer in the context of obviously the magic being present, but that not being the only sort of thing you've got to contend with, obviously, right? And then actually even Klaus's presence in itself is a rejection of that in some ways, right? And Klaus's, I forget, what's Klaus's original... Do we build Klaus, right? If I recall,
we fixed him. He was purposely dismantled so that he would stop murdering people. He murdered some of the Requiem agents that came in to help him develop the bomb.
Right.
And then they dismantled. He lost his hands. It was lost. The battery was lost, and then you help repair him, and he's still kind of psycho. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And now he's slaughtering people in multiplayer. And soon, I guess, in Liberty Falls, and maybe in Terminus too. So in Liberty Falls, you have that a little bit of that dissonance present still for sure. But in contrast to something like Shadows of Evil, let's say, Shadows is very much a sort of normal looking town that then gets the Cthulhu spin on it. Like the Max's quote, I think, is perfect, where he says this world is fractured and broken. And you really get the idea that it's sort of a mirror image of the town it once was, but it's through a broken mirror. And that broken mirror is giving you a manifestation of the world that should never have happened, could never happen, and yet here it is, right? So the world itself, like without the zombies in it, without the Margwar in it, without anything else, it already feels so dripping in ambience. Whereas the majority of the internet would say Liberty Falls does not feel that way. But I'm curious if you disagree with that, or if you just think that it doesn't need that ambience, or like where do you stand on the no aura argument for Liberty Falls?
Yeah, I do agree with people a lot. I think that that's a very good point to make. I do think I like when Zombies is always going bombastic and trying a lot of new things. This is something that I flagged originally. I made 2 IW reviews. When I first started with Zombies, I made an original IW review, and then I made a better one later on. I originally flagged IW for that, where it's like with Zombies, you have Alcatraz Island, you have the trenches of World War I, you have a frozen castle, a desolate island, and then IW is just a theme park, campgrounds, New York City. And I think that same, even if the art design IW is amazing, I think that same kind of aspect is happening with Cold War and Kevin Drew's lead on the actual game, where it's, let's set these in normal places, let's set these in sci-fi oriented places, let's take normal places and try and flip them on their head. But I want to see more. Liberty Falls has a good foundation, but it's just missing that linchpin that really drags it all together for me personally. Okay,
and what could that be for you?
Yeah, I know for a lot of people it's overdone at this point. I'm fully of the belief, at least, this is my absolute expectations, that halfway through the Easter egg, something goes wrong and the whole map gets completely inverted into the Dark Aether. So only the church is dark. The church is normal. Dark Aether is at the whole map. I'd be almost floored if the entire Dark Aether was just that one church room. I would be shocked if that was all that it was.
Okay, so that's, for you, that's the sort of like, the thumbs up, we're back, boys. Like, that's the moment where you're like, okay, all the worries have washed away and we're good now. It has aura.
Definitely. I think that the Dark Aether, especially if it's done right, I think if it's de-machined to the next level, because I would hope that that's where, like, they're lulling you into this, like, normal looking world, and then with a guided quest, if you choose to do it, that's where you get to see more than what there really is.
Yeah. I hope you're right. I really do.
I agree. I hope I'm right too, because it's gonna be bad if I'm not right.
The thing that is worrying me, because I've thought about this a lot, obviously, the thing that worries me is Treyarch in recent years, and just Activision and Call of Duty in general, but let's say Treyarch, has, I think, lost some of its confidence in its marketing, specifically within the following statement. I don't want people to run with this and get the wrong idea. I think they've lost their confidence in taking things that are going to be revealed as part of an Easter egg boss fight, or midway through the main quest, or it's a harder thing to unlock it, it's a harder thing to achieve, or whatever. They've lost their confidence in not showing that stuff pre-launch. Because it used to be that if we got a crazy Easter egg boss fight, that was not in the trailer. Right? Like, that should not be in the trailer. That reveal being in the trailer, it's a spoiler. But nowadays, I think there's a lot more like, oh, what if people don't get to the end of the Easter egg? They'll never see the boss fight. We've got to put it in the trailer. Like, giant worm in Modern Warfare Zombies. Yes. Why was that shown in advance? Doesn't make any sense. Really poor, in my opinion, to reveal what that was early, and then just have us grinding through all those objectives leading up to something that we already knew what it was. Like, it defines it in too explicit a way. I want it to be a mystery. I want to be blown away when those giant war elephants come out in 9. Like, I want to be losing my marbles like I was at the time when we solved it. So in Liberty Falls, my concern is based on cynicism that I have come to adopt based on how I know they market these games now. The fact that they haven't shown any underground area, or they haven't shown any Aether inversion, or they haven't done anything like that at all for Liberty Falls. Literally all they've done is shown us, obviously, the gameplay of above ground, and it's daylight, and it's nice outside, and they've shown us the church, and you're indoors, and that's it. There's not been any conceit towards even what the story is really going to be. We know that there's, like, some scientists that we've got to rescue. We also know that the map actually, and this is a point that Telixian pointed out to me, and I think a lot of people have missed this. The map doesn't actually take place at the same time as Terminus. Despite the fact that there was so much marketing about that originally, the cutscenes take place at the same time, but Liberty Falls takes place the next day. Like, the actual gameplay takes place the next day. So it's a day later. What's his name? Bradford?
Blanchard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blanchard, yeah.
He's like, oh, I've been, like, I mean, looking for somewhere safe to be for like 24 hours now, man. Like glad you guys are here, all this stuff. That's all we've seen. We haven't seen anything further. And my cynical ass sees that and goes, okay, well, I know that they would market the further stuff if there was further stuff. So ergo, there is no further stuff, which is scary as hell. But also, maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't know.
Those are all amazing points that you've made right there. I totally agree. I think if there's any game where they're going to prove us wrong, it's this game. If not, then I think we know what we're getting into for the next couple of years. And I think that for a lot of fans, this is the game that's going to dictate whether or not they keep playing.
Yeah.
Or keep supporting it.
Yeah, I agree.
I totally agree with that. I know Jason Mundell was asked around the time IW was coming out, and they would always reveal their bosses in the trailer. Jason said he would never do something like that. And then come Alpha Omega, they tease the Avogadro at the end. Come Mauer, they tease Valentina at the end of that trailer. Forsaken's very much in the part of the Forsaken map. You almost reveal him so quickly.
Yep.
And I totally agree with that sentiment that if there's something they want to show off, they're going to. Like, you look at the gameplay breakdown. They've broken down every single system before we've even gotten a chance to look at it.
Yeah. Like, that was a weird one, because, like, on one hand, I'm like, this is great because it shows confidence in zombies in some ways, to be giving us a month of just blog post after blog post and trailer after trailer and all this stuff. Like, that was amazing. But part of me that was also like, are you just showing everything here? Like, if you are, that's not good. But if you're just scratching the surface, then hell yeah, I don't care at all. That's awesome.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there
look
any...
at... Oh, sorry. Look at BO3 real quick, because BO3, we had just the Shadows trailer, and then we had Gobblegum, so we had genuinely no idea how they worked. And it was up to us to play the game to finally get an idea of how they work, how the system is. Like, we didn't get... We saw them, but we had... some people thought they were perks, so...
Yeah.
So we had genuinely no idea what was going on in that system until some leaks came out, so we knew what they were. And then once we actually got our hands on the game, we got to experiment with them all.
So this actually leads nicely to the whole, like, hand-holding era that we're now in, right? As far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are emphatically in favor of guided mode. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that there's a point where the developer should be guiding the player, and I think the guided mode for the Easter egg is great. Other stuff, I'm not so confident that they should be doing.
What's the other stuff you're referring to?
Yes, I think that whatchamacallit, like doing all these systems where it's like the rarity system. I think the point system, as much as I love it, and I think the change is a good idea to get people to use different weapons. It's a bit divisive. I understand that a lot. I know with Kevin Drew, he's talked about like his experiences with his brother, and that made him really think about how he's changing the point system, which completely flipped the gameplay system on its head.
Yeah.
Where now you have rarities, you have salvage, you have armor, you have things that are made to make it a lot easier for players. And I think that there are, just like anything that Treyarch has done, better ways to do that. A big one is armor. I think armor, I wish it was stylistically not just Warzone armor.
Yeah.
I think that I don't blame people. I think the shield was a really good idea. It always gave each map personality. I think putting the armor on the wall is a great idea, because that's something I always vouched for. I understand that a lot of people would never, like, unless they watched a guide or they had someone walking them through it, they would never build the shield. They didn't know it even existed on every map.
Okay, so you're in favor of the armor dummy as well? Like from
the armor dummy, yeah, definitely. Ivan, I think is a great idea.
Is Ivan the name of the armor dummy?
Yeah, it is.
Wow, I'm learning something new.
The Ivan Station.
Is that what it's called? The Ivan Station?
Yeah, I think it's an acronym.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I know the robot itself is called Ivan. That, like, the little dummy guy.
Right. So Ivan has been retconned.
Completely. Yeah. Completely nuked. They took him out.
Poor guy.
But I do like the shield a lot. I think what made the shield super interesting was that, like, you could take hits with the shield or you could not, and you could save durability that way. There was a very min-max way that you could utilize it, whereas with armor, you're taking that hit every single time, and once you run out, there's no way to get it back unless you get RNG drops from undead.
Yeah, which now in Black Ops 6 is less frequent.
Yes, which I don't like, because how conducive you need armor for the higher rounds. You need it to deal with the more ranged enemies. Cold War mitigated that with the Jug upgrade, which gave you more armor durability, so that helped.
Yeah. It makes me think of Doom Eternal, I think it was, where they talked so much about the way that they had designed the risk reward so that if you really got in there with the demons and you were melee killing them and you were doing your executions and stuff, then you would get extra drops, right? Because you're flinging yourself into battle and you're proving your skill, and so you deserve to be rewarded for exhibiting that skill. But if you were much more passive and sat back and didn't do anything and just sort of stayed as far away as you could, you'd get no drops. And so you'd be forced into the battle, so you'd have to be sort of dancing this risk-reward dance. And I feel like what removing the drops or minimizing the drops does in Black Ops 6 is it means that either I could like slay out and I could go crazy just killing everything and then getting my stuff back, my ammo back and my armor back as a reward for my expertise, or I could, I don't know, use a trap or something or whatever, right? Whereas now I feel like you're just going to dump a load of ammo into an enemy and it's going to die and you're not going to get anything and you're going to be like, why did I bother? Like, I'm just losing all my stuff here. Like, there's no way I can flex to get the extra ammo or to get the extra reward or to benefit beyond the thing just being dead. But it would be dead if I killed it a much less efficient way or whatever as well. So I think that there's maybe some tweaking that they could do there. Because when I played Black Ops 6 and I played Terminus, the ammo sort of changes that they'd made really was frustrating. I ran into several instances where I just didn't have ammo and I was just like, this is just annoying and I'm not near an ammo crate right now and it's just so I'm hoping that that's something that they just tweak as we get to launch.
Because there's a lot of different points to pull out from there.
Yeah.
I think that they're trying hard to balance back to the survival, like ammo management of the old series with still the action hero-ness of the new series. Because I think the more they changed, the more they've made it complicated on themselves. BO1 was perfect where BO1, BO2, you have good weapons, bad weapons, and wonder weapons. And wonder weapons usually trump everything. Then BO3 kind of flipped that on its head with alternate ammo types, which are just as powerful as wonder weapons now. Then BO4 flipped on its head again with specialist weapons and wonder weapons and the shield and the equipment always doing infinite damage. Then Cold War did away with all of that, and now you have rarity, you have weapons that can technically rival wonder weapons, you have equipment which is basically better than wonder weapons at times, you have score streaks, you have the field upgrades, and you have all these different systems at play, and I think the balance is really kind of messed up right now. If you min-max your weapon, you can do just fine. If you're a new player, I think it goes completely against what they're trying to set up, and your weapons are even weaker than before. I think rarity is poorly conveyed to the player. I think the whole system is kind of redundant. I think PAP levels are a good idea, late game idea, but I hope that they're adding damage to the weapons, not just giving you the amount of damage that a normal PAP weapon would have done over 3 Pack-a-Punches, which I don't think they have, but that also might be because they lowered the health cap too. Health cap, I think, is a good idea. But they're trying so hard to balance all these different features, and I think the more they made it complicated, the less that they've achieved that.
Yeah. So let me pull some thoughts out from what you've just said and get you to dig into them a bit more. Do you feel like the quote that everyone always refers to with Kevin Drew talking about his brother being yelled at for not optimizing his points on whatever it was, Kino de Toten or something, right?
I think it was Shadows, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Do you think that is the core root? Obviously, it wasn't just like, it happened one day and he was like, okay, I'm going to flip the entire game on its head. But do you think that change to the point system is essentially the underpinning of all of these other changes and all of the other areas of awkwardness now, weapon rarities, pack-a-punch levels, all these sorts of things? Do you think that all stems from the points change? Because they were like, well, we're changing points, so that means that we have to do all these other things for the way that you climb up the power curve and you do all these other things. And so they're just trying to sort of fix a problem that they almost caused for themselves, like a new problem they almost caused for themselves. What do you think?
Yes. Trying to excuse themselves of a problem by making systems that excuse that system. So I will say one thing in BO4, they changed the point system there for a whole different reason we don't know. Because BO4's gameplay is nothing like Cold War's. It's health. It's percentage based. So the amount of damage that you do gets you points, and then you get bonus points for headshots and melee. Also, real quick, in this game, I noticed that melee is only 105, not 115, which I think is really sad that they lost that reference.
I didn't notice that.
That was the one reference to 115 in besides the meteors in MWZ. That was the one reference to 115.
It's back now, though. 115 is
you're right.
Canonically back now. Yeah.
Yeah, because the ray gun has it on it.
Yeah.
The meteors are showing up in MWZ, so we'll find out what that all leads into.
Yeah, it's so weird, man. I'm so confused.
We'll get into that later. But anyways, what was I just lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
The point system being the underpinning. They were excusing themselves, that thing.
Yes. MWZ does the exact same thing. The schematics feed into the gameplay loop, which then it excuses the hour-long timer. I think a lot of this stuff tries to excuse itself, and there are systems that are created to excuse other systems. Weapon rarity is so that you have a reason to have lower damage weapons. You can spawn in with a loadout weapon, and all of that lets you use any weapon that you want, because they really want you to change up your weaponry. They want you to try different things. But I also feel like that none of the systems are conducive in that. MWZ was terrible at that. You couldn't apply any of your weapon blueprints to weapons that you pulled out of the box or the wall. So you were more incentivized once you got to the end game of MWZ to use your legendary Aether tool on the weapon. You were incentivized to keep your loadout weapon and use a wonder weapon. You were never incentivized to hit the box, despite how much they really wanted you to. Because the game was so crazy and hectic, you couldn't keep up if you didn't do that.
So you feel like there's multiple systems working towards differing goals here, and that's what's causing that friction?
Yes, and then they're all kind of fighting each other.
Yeah. So
and I think that's a big issue that I think people are totally justified with the gameplay of Cold War and Vanguard and MWZ. Everything is fighting itself.
Yeah. So let's
for reasons to exist.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second. If they're excusing themselves from problems that they've created with their own systems in the modern takes on zombies, could the same argument be made for the original system? Let's go back to World at War, right? Let's just go back to complete basics. And I don't know where I'm going to land on this, but I'm going to sort of work it through in real time here. So you're shooting zombies, and the zombies are dying, and you essentially have a single resource initially, which is your ammunition, right? Before you add any other systems, you have a gun and you're shooting zombies, so you have ammo, right? So that's your first rigid system that you cannot get rid of. You can't get rid of the ammo system. That's your first resource.
Yes.
Second resource is then points immediately after that. And the thinking being that you might want to buy more ammunition, and so you could buy more ammunition with your points. Now, it could be free, but then is there any difference between whether or not you kill a zombie or whether or not you get more kills compared to another player in your team? No. So I guess the point system feels like a pretty natural extension to that. The implementation of the point system where it's per hit, I don't think that's mega necessary. I don't think it's like an axiom of what the sort of game scenario thrusts onto you as a player. I think it could have been another way initially and it would have still worked. It might not have been as good. That's a separate argument, but it would have worked. Regardless, though, you have a point system, and then you have the requisite need, based on that, to have things to spend points on. And as much as just buying ammo from a wall chalk or something is great, that's nice to have that as a place where you can buy ammo for that specific gun, two things can happen. One is it would be nice to mix things up with somewhere to use different weapons, right? And have an element of variety coming in. And then also to have an opportunity to have a more powerful weapon than you might otherwise have from just buying it from a wall weapon or whatever. And there's the mystery box, right? So like at our core, things are pretty simple, things are pretty set. I don't think there's any systems there that feel kind of out of place or that they've been elbowed in or shoved in or whatever. You start adding perks, it's just more flavor for ways for you to get more powerful and to spend the money that you've earned because you've got an excess of money at this point. You add the Pack-a-Punch in, and that's a direct response to the fact that people are just getting too good and they're hitting the same kind of round cap. Everyone's hitting round 20 on Deriz, and they're like, well, I'd like to be able to go further, and so Pack-a-Punch allows you to do that, right? I think if we sort of stop there for a second, those systems unless I'm forgetting something, and I'd love to hear if you've got any thoughts on this, but I think those systems all are pretty cohesive overall. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think also traps are in there too. Traps are also a way to spend your money and get to high rounds without Pack-a-Punch.
Perfect.
But
yeah.
That's so that's the point.
For sure. So I mean, traps were they're in Verrückt, right? So that was a sooner implementation as well. So it was a nice additional power jump for you to be able to deal with the zombies even sooner. So the Treyarch team clearly, all the way back in the day, was very aware of the needs of the player base and the needs of the player, the individual player in a given match, and were clearly designing systems specifically to speak to that, right? What would you say to a slightly later term decision like alternate ammo types? Where would you place that in my kind of characterization of these underlying core mechanics that definitely are necessary, they're axiomatic, and then maybe if we use the other end of the spectrum as some of the Cold War systems as being sort of fluff to fix other things, etc. Where do you think ammo types fit?
Yeah, the way that I interpret all this is like a hierarchy of needs, where it's like you have points, ammo, upgrading, but then when does it start becoming superfluous? I think BO3, I think ammo types are absolutely superfluous. I think with how overpowered the wonder weapons are, that was just their way of allowing you to use other stuff than just the wonder weapons, especially on maps where like Shadows, only one person can get the Apothecon, for example. So that was definitely out of a need of let's give everyone something that they can use late game if you're playing in co-op, for example. Because before that, you had no choice but to just have nothing.
Yeah, to just suck.
Everyone, the guy who gets the ray gun early on, the guy who gets like the wonder weapon, like the thunder gun, that was it. That was the guy who was the most powerful. Sure, he couldn't make as many points, but to say that he was in any way more vulnerable than the other players is almost a lie. Like he was most definitely not vulnerable in the slightest compared to the other players.
Yep. Yeah. I mean,
that guy always had a guaranteed get out of jail free button.
Yeah, quite literally, especially with something like a thunder gun. Like,
yes,
somebody gets that second spin on Kino, and you're like, okay, I'll actually just go wash the dishes or something. I'll come back and we'll still be like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's a great way of putting that. I think you've characterized that well, because what that means is it once again fits in to our framework that we're constructing of the Treyarch team at that point, seeing problems with the foundation of the way that people started playing the game, right? So you went from Nitro and Toten, where you're just sort of messing around, but then later down the line, okay, one person does get a wonder weapon, one person does get really powerful, that's awesome, but then what do the other people do? And also, does the singular powerful weapon mean that variety is no longer of interest, right? Like on World at War in Nitro and Toten, if I get a Browning and my mate gets the MG, we're both happy, right? We're both still, it's still viable to do what we do. But later down the line, you get to Kino to Toten or something, yeah, your mate with the thunder gun is just categorically a god compared to you being a little peasant running around with your Type 100 or something or whatever. Like, I mean, Type 100 on Kino, but you know what I mean. So the question I would ask is, in that scenario, they're fixing weapon variety, they're expanding weapon variety, maybe in some small ways at the cost of wonder weapon power, but wonder weapons are still really cool, and they often have a slightly more unique kind of element to the way that they can be utilized, or some sort of unique effect or something like that. Which means that maybe they're not made completely irrelevant just because other guns are more powerful. So maybe that's fine. Yeah. Are there any, let's say, BO3 and before, because obviously BO4 did change quite a lot. Are there any other systems, BO3 or before, that you think are an addition that were shoehorned in the way that some people would argue stuff is shoehorned in Cold War? Like Gobblegums, do those feel good?
Actually, I think they do. As much as I despise the system, I'm a big like classic user. You'll never see me using like Perkaholic or anything.
Yeah.
But I think the system is really cool. It gives a lot of players different replayability. It really gives people different options. Do you want to go with immolations? Revelations is super heavy on that, so that completely changes that mechanic now with how you hit the box. Perkaholic, you get all the perks instantly. I think where that system falls apart is when the Gobblegums are no longer in service of the gameplay. And I do think Perkaholic is the biggest offender of that, where it's simply, you can't get more perk slots than are available on the map. This is, besides, the only way is Unquenchable, Soda Fountain, perkaholic. But most of them do a pretty good job of let's add more to the gameplay than it's already there.
Agreed. And I think one of the nice things about Gobbles as well is that there's a world where it was a little bit more maybe even Covenant-y, where the game dictated what you were getting in a given moment. And you sort of went up to your, I forget what it was even called, the book thing. And
Altar of the Covenants, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So you go up to the altar and it says, okay, yeah, you can pick from these, but it's a game choice as opposed to you being like, okay, I'm going to load in with these Gobblegums because these are the ones that I want to randomize in my game, and that's the flavor of experience that I want. So I like the agency of Gobblegums as well. I think that's a positive in their favor. As we move towards Black Ops 4, I think we start to see systems get a little bit more into gray area, a little bit as to the reason the change is being made. And an example that we have already referenced here that you mentioned a moment ago was the way that they changed the BO4 point system, right?
Yes.
Do you feel like, given what we know about the existing axiomatic systems, do we feel like the BO4 change has merit?
BO4's change is entirely predicated on the fact that it's like, we want, at least the way I feel it with Chaos, we want to introduce 15 different special enemies into the game. We want the gameplay to be more kinetic. We want it to have more variety. How do we get players to be able to fight those things with the current systems of the undead? Because your weapons can't be too powerful. And that's where they came up with the idea of specialist weapons. Let's have a wonder weapon always in your back pocket. And on 9, you are fighting gladiators by round 4. And if you don't get the strife immediately, how do you counter them? Well, you have a specialist weapon. That's your tool against them. You have lethal equipment, which is always insta-killing. You have a shield, which is always doing infinite damage, just like it was in BO3, due to health cap being lowered. You have all these different systems, and then you have the point system with how it reacts to all of that. With the point system, I think they just wanted to change it. I think BO4 is the only game where I don't really have enough of an answer as to why they would change it.
Okay, so
because its systems don't play into it very well.
Yeah, I would say we can characterize what you said for the greater range of enemies and things like that as essentially Treyarch wanted maybe to mess with the power curve just overall, and the relative power of the enemy that you're fighting at a given time versus what your expected power is on a given round, right? So Gladiators round 4, normally you don't have to deal with that for a while longer. Even on a map like Origins, you're not fighting a Panzer on round 4, right?
Yes.
And Origins is probably the most notorious map of all time for, like, Jesus Christ, you hear that thing spawn in and you panic and everybody dies there. Like, everybody dies there. There's just there's no escaping it when you first play. So they wanted to change the power curve, and to do that as a sort of two variable process where they say, okay, well, we need to make the enemies more powerful at a time where they don't normally get that powerful, and then we really need the player to be able to counter that in some way, right? So specialist system makes sense as something that you can time to solve that problem at round 4, and it just then so happens to then solve that problem indefinitely for the rest of your playtime as well, right? So you could almost boil it down to purely just wanting round 4 to be cool meant that we got the specialist system. Obviously that's a crazy oversimplification, but let's frame it that way just for the time being. So the point system, I would argue, could be a change that was made for 2 possible reasons. One is that with that new power curve in place, they probably just did a bunch of playtesting and realized that with the old system, it was too strongly mapped to the old power curve. Like, there was too much of an expectation that you would get Pack-a-Punch at a certain round, you would be spinning the mystery box on a certain round, and you would be doing those things because you'd be forced to by the enemies you'd be facing on given rounds, right? So it might have been that they were just like, this feels like old stuff, so let's just make our own new power curve entirely and a point system to match that. That might have been one part of it. The other part of it was, I think, a reaction to some of the things that the customs community had actually been experimenting with. So Quiz made TMG, oh god, I can't remember the name of the map now, but it's the one with multiple floating islands. This is before Revelations came out, for the record. And totally changed the point system. And she put in a system where basically you can use a shotgun. This was Quiz's thinking. You can use a shotgun and not be penalized for doing so compared to using some other bullet weapon, because if I use a pistol, I'll get 1,000 points for shooting this zombie a bunch of times. But if I use a shotgun and I kill it straight away, I get less points. Like, why would I be penalized for using a powerful weapon? That sucks. So Quiz made that change. I think Treyarch saw that, to be honest, and they went, damn, that's actually a really good idea. And that was then the sort of ethos and the reason for why they did it, because they were like, actually, we want these other weapons, these shotgun-like weapons or a bazooka or whatever, to still be viable, rather than everybody being funneled towards high RPM weapons, right?
Yes.
So still to some extent with the point system, still sort of fixing issues that we had seen with the way players played the game in World at War and Black Ops 1, right? Like, that was still a sort of similarly motivated decision that they made there, I think. But the power curve thing, I think, is different. That is Treyarch no longer saying, this is just an axiom of what emerges from the game itself, from the sandbox that we've created. This is a natural emergence. But it was a little bit more Treyarch saying, this is no longer an organic emergence. We are going to force this emergence and then fit things to it. How do you feel about that?
I'd say it's pretty in line with some of their thinking.
Okay. Do you think there is room for that to actually be really good? Because I don't want to just categorically carte blanche say, and therefore it's bad. What do you think of BO4's sort of gameplay and stuff overall? I'm curious.
I love BO4's gameplay. It's my favorite game in the series, but it has a lot of issues. I can't deny that in the slightest. And I think one of the biggest issues is the power dynamic. Just because it's so different, they really wanted, like, for example, you fight the Giganese on round 4 or 5 in Ancient Evil. That's a mini boss. That's your Panzer on that map. Yep. They want you to fight him so early on. And I'd say that's part of what I love about it. I love the action of it. I love the fantasy of it. I love the scriptedness of some of the events and chaos. But I don't think it does everything right. I also think the idea of, let's create a system, and then let's create systems to answer those systems. Because that's entirely what MWZ's philosophy is built on. Let's set the game for an hour long. Okay, well, since it's an hour long, we can give you schematics. We can give you perks for free. We can give you a ray gun, because you can only hold the weapon for an hour, and then you can't build it for a day or two. You don't have access to it anymore. So that was their way of balancing that. I don't like this idea that everything exists to validate itself in other systems. I think that's a bit of a bad game design decision. And I hope that's not the case. I might just be reading it. If I read it from the other direction, it might come off as better.
Yeah,
I think from the direction that we're reading it from, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, I think Modified Zombies is an interesting one, because I think what I'm starting to see as we characterize it this way is that there's often a root decision that the team wants to do almost as a stylistic choice, which then has a whole lot of implications which touch and alter the axiomatic parts of the game that were established so long ago, right?
Yes.
And in Modified Zombies, it's the hour-long time limit, but I would actually argue that the hour-long time limit is itself actually like a second-order effect. And I think that the core with that is, how do we put this on the Warzone map?
Oh, okay.
And I think that the decision to put it on the Warzone map has it has a dozen consequences. One of them is, it doesn't make sense to be on the Warzone map, but only in a team of 4 people. Like, that just doesn't make sense. But we want it to be on the Warzone map. Maybe we don't have time to develop any other maps as well, so we have to put it on the Warzone map.
Yes.
And therefore, we need more players in the game. What does more players in the game mean? It means matchmaking is going to be infinitely more difficult. It means that the actual compute, the load that needs to be undertaken in order to actually make the game run in the first place is also significantly greater. And that has to take place on a server. That can't take place on your local Xbox 360 or something. Like, it's just going to blow the thing up, right? You're going to have enough red rings of death to make the thing levitate. So the core, I think, is put it on the Warzone map, and then it's like, how the hell do we manage that? Well, we have to make all these unfortunate sort of second order decisions. And I think the hour-long time limit means that There's still servers spinning up and spinning down, so the matchmaking isn't too dreadful. It's kind of like it's a cap there. It also means that with a lot of the other decisions they made, like how do we make a Warzone map feel like it's full, feel like there's stuff to do? Well, let's put contracts in. And then it's like, okay, how do we make people not do too many contracts and get really bored of it? Well,
here's an hour-long timer. Exactly,
right. So I think it's second order in that sense.
That's a good point, yeah.
But it really clearly is another case of almost like a BO4 where they were like, let's make a stylistic choice. Warzone map, zombies. And then that really makes things crazy. And I would almost actually say, and I know I'm riffing a bit here, so forgive me for blabbering.
No, please, go for it, yeah.
But I would almost say the modern zombies formula that we as a community in general, I'm speaking in very general terms here, that formula that we say online we dislike, and the calls that we've had over the years to like go back to round-based zombies and things like that, I actually feel like the request there is not a return to round-based zombies. I think that the request is a return to zombies gameplay based on axiomatic systems that don't have the stylistic injection that causes these deviations in various different directions with so many second and third order effects.
That's a good point. Yeah, 100%. I think that the only issue with that is that like that's just so non-conducive to who Treyarch is. Something I know about Treyarch does not want to do the same game twice. They are always experimenting, reinventing the wheel. They are never, let's do BO3 part 2. It is, how do we take old systems, build upon them, add new stuff to them, make it interesting and unique. I think that they're so afraid of every game coming off as samey, or a game after another comes off as very samey, which is actually happening right here with BO6. Yeah. But like you look at changes that they constantly make. You look at like Outbreak going to MWZ. It wasn't just let's do Outbreak again. Let's evolve on Outbreak. Outbreak was very boring where there's a lot of open space. You have contracts that are split across these massive maps. And now in MWZ, it says, let's put smaller ones everywhere. Your core progression isn't tied to you doing a main objective. It's just you get points and then you work towards the story missions. You work towards the Aether rifts. You work towards endgame content, but that leads to other issues of you getting bottlenecked in tier 3, which is what's happening now. You're competing with people for contracts now. It doesn't flow as well because tier 3 doesn't change size. The map didn't evolve. There wasn't more things to explore besides the Dark Aether rifts, but you're bottlenecked to go into them in tier 3. So I think every change in my like optimistic perspective is with good intentions. I just think sometimes it falls to the wayside. Sometimes they don't do it right. Sometimes they're just like, we didn't do this idea well. Let's redo it the second time around and do it better. But then there's also issues again. Yeah. I'm currently working on like a 2-hour MWZ video, and my ending points come out to, the game is fun. It has a ton of issues that excuse itself, but I think this is a great foundation, again, to build off of for their next experience. But at the same time, we can't keep just building off of something. You need to actually land with these ideas. I'm getting sick of like saying, well, this is a good idea. This is a good idea. I understand this, but can we get a good idea that's not excusing itself because of like COVID, or Treyarch was pulled off of this game to work on Vanguard, or their B team is their open world team, which is working on MWZ. When does this end? When am I going to, and BO6 for a ton of people, this is their end point. There's no more excuses on the line. There are 4 years on this game. Treyarch, do or die, because people are willing to let them die at this point if it's not what they're looking for.
So,
I know that was a lot, sorry.
No. But with that in mind then, do you feel like they stuck the landing with Cold War? Just to quickly temperature check that? Yeah, okay.
With the time given, with the constraints given, with the way they manage all the resources, 100%. I love Cold War, despite its issues that it has.
Okay,
I think it lands with what it wants to do, which is reinvent zombies after BO4 nearly blew up the series.
Yep. Okay. So why is Black Ops 6 so similar to Cold War?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe they really like that gameplay style. Maybe they said, let's not take it in another wild direction. We found one that's stuck with a good player base. Let's just build off of that first and go from there. Because BO4, they had to change from that. That was so radically different that people were so disdained against it that they had to go back to the drawing board and say, let's not do that. We figured out what some players don't like. Specialists didn't work. remakes didn't work, which is a whole different conversation. And then they said, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's do Dark Aether. Let's get people acclimated to this world. Cold War is your first act. This is the second act, almost the third act, if anything. They need to stick this landing where if you want to develop a cohesive story and narrative, it has to kind of be very similar to the previous game to build off of it. In the same way that BO2 builds off of BO1. They just chose Cold War because that's the game that those developers are familiar with. That's the one that they probably find that their favorite is because that's the one they worked on the most.
Yeah.
And then the nitty gritty is style, HUD, optimization. That's where you get into those more nitty gritty issues. But overall, this is a game that they really want to tell a story of.
Yeah. So
that's why they chose it.
Do you feel like BO2 would I be putting words in your mouth to say that you feel like BO2 is BO 1.5?
Yes.
Okay.
Taking BO1 to the next level. That's what BO2 is.
Okay.
Because I think BO1's a great. I think BO1 might be my favorite game in the series next to BO4. I think it stands the test of time better than any of the other ones. But BO2 is absolutely, let's add buildables. Let's add more special enemies. Let's add a mini boss. Let's get crazier with the wonder weapons in the quest. Let's add 2 quests now per map. Let's add an overarching narrative. How do we build on top of that? Because Moon has that. You have connections to, you have a carryover from Call That and Shangri-La. You need to do those to do the full Moon Easter egg. And then the end games and Buried are just like that. Okay,
so with that analog in mind, that we can sort of, without any ill will towards BO2, we can call it BO 1.5.
Yes.
BO6 being Cold War 1.5. Do we think that's fair?
That's a bit of, it's a different conversation. I think Cold War is a more constricted game. This is definitely Cold War 2 with what they're able to expand upon, whereas Cold War is so much more limited in scope with what they could do.
What do you feel like makes it a 2, not a 1.5?
But I will say that is fair, though, to call it a 1.5, though. I think that's entirely conjecture of just, do you think Cold War was constricted by its time constraints and its development cycle, and then Cold War, BO6 is the evolution completely on that, whereas BO2 is both games got full development cycles. Let's just build on top of that and then focus on maps. Whereas Cold War is trying so desperately hard to work its way out of the constraints that, it's working its way out of hell. BO6 is the same thing. It's working its way right out of MWZ, Vanguard, Cold War. And I think that shows in Liberty Falls, which is the stylism. The style isn't that strong. The HUD isn't that well looked at. They've taken a ton of our complaints into mind. They've heard a lot of what we had to say. But sadly, I think some things just fall the wayside. It stops becoming an excuse of, well, they need more time. They need more development ideas. Suggest maybe that's just not their strong suit anymore, and it's not going to be as good.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
I think is what's happening with Liberty Falls. I think it's past the point of excuses.
If, again, with a strong caveat, if it is in line with our pessimistic assumptions as to how it is, because who knows if they turn on that Easter egg quest and suddenly the map's inverted and it's sick. Like, I think this is something that I've not really known how to appropriately convey this point in a lot of my videos, because I say this a lot, but people just selectively don't listen to it because they really like when I critique the game, but they don't like when I praise it.
Oh my God, don't get me started on that.
But like, I mean, yeah, for anyone online that's voicing an opinion about it, I suppose it's not just me, although I feel like I get a pretty sharp part of the spear on that point.
Yes, 100%.
The Liberty Falls map itself might be a 10 out of 10. Like,
it really could be.
We don't know.
We don't know.
I would love for it to be, because it's much better for all of us if it's a 10 than if it's a 4 and we were right that it was a 4. Like,
yep.
I'll take 10 every time.
I think the COD Next gameplay has backfired so badly, it's not even funny. Where it's like, this is the first time they've ever done that. And I think they really wanted to appeal to the MP Warzone people in the same way that they wanted to show Warzone and MP off to the Zombies people. Because, like, you look at Dalek's gameplay, they wanted him off of Zombies to show Warzone. Because he had all those Zombies people. they know that they want to market that's a new crowd. They want to get those people into Warzone MP.
Yeah. And on that point, just as a very quick tangent, I really didn't like the way that they kicked Dalek off, but then
oh my god, I thought that
Dennis
was so unprofessional.
Yeah,
the way they handled it was really bad.
Yeah, it really, really bad vibes overall. And then Duke Dennis just still playing and it being fine. It just felt like, oh, because you're the zombies guy, you don't have any agency here whatsoever. But like this other dude who like is a little bit less close to Call of Duty, we'll just give him whatever he wants, kind of thing. It's like Dalek's been here so long, and
I know, my god,
I don't know. It just felt really sort of off, that moment where he was kicked. I'm just like, why?
Like it was really cool to see Dalek on the podcast with them afterwards. That was cool.
Yeah.
But it's like,
and for zombies to be represented on it, like, good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's cool. But if for every like 2 steps we get forward, I feel like it's 1 step back sometimes. I think that was so calculated. They knew Duke Dennis's crowd doesn't play zombies, so they really wanted to show that off to those guys. They knew Dalek's crowd doesn't play Warzone, so they really wanted to show that off to those guys. They're trying to. That's why we'll never get a zombies exclusive game, because they know if they do that, they cut their audience in a third.
Right. Yeah. And the zombies community would still poop all over it.
Yeah, exactly.
We are who we are, right?
But that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, it's like Call of Duty knows for a fact that's why they keep doing zombies, even if the games don't do well sometimes. Those are still sales. I bought MWZ because I'm a zombies player. I wouldn't have bought Modern Warfare if it didn't have that.
Yeah, hands down. 100%.
And so that's how they got me. So that's why they know for a fact they're trying to expand their crowd, get the widest net possible. And I don't know if that dictates their decisions to implement Warzone mechanics, if that implements set a map that looks like an MP map. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that's the reason why. But as we talked about earlier, at some point that stops being the excuse, and that just has to be maybe they're just not good at developing unique maps. So hopefully Terminus proves me wrong.
Yeah, I think it will. I think Terminus is very cool looking from the jump, from the moment you spawn in. It feels cool. I will say it feels like a Cold War level of cool, as opposed to like a Moon level of cool, for example.
100%. Yeah.
And I think
I get that.
The old days of the Moons and things like that are, and I want to say this with the prayer going up to Kevin Drew in the heavens that you prove me wrong here, Kevin Drew. But I think those old days are over. I think that there is a type of aesthetic and a type of goal for zombies overall, which is no longer the bombastic stuff that we once had. And I think that's tragic in my personal opinion, but some people prefer stuff that's a bit more grounded, I suppose. So
yeah, I think I think that goes in multiple different directions. You have did Kevin Drew get promoted under the direction and plan that he needs to get zombies out to more people? Like, we look at Jason Mundell going to Kevin Drew and whoever was running it during Cold War.
Corky.
Oh, was it Corky? Yeah. So, I mean, is Corky still there?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So then I wonder if, like, going from Corky to Kevin, they said, this is our action plan. BO4 blew up in everyone's faces. People weren't playing. The numbers weren't there. You need to get the game to a wider audience. That's our Activision directed plan that you need to fulfill, or we're kicking you out like Jason.
Yeah, I suspect that it is. I think that ultimately what has most likely happened is that Activision have called up Corky one day and said, just to sort of reiterate to you, Buster, you might have had an incredible amount of success with like Black Ops 3 and all these previous games that he's also worked on, obviously. But these days, we make the most money from Warzone selling skins to people that don't hit level 30. And where's the zombies equivalent, right? And so we've just sort of trended in that direction. And I don't think he can get away from that. I don't think any of them can. And I don't think that's their fault in some ways. But this is a point that I think my audience sort of misunderstands sometimes. I can recognize that Kevin Drew is trying to do the best he absolutely can, and Corky is trying to do the best he absolutely can, etc., while also condemning the decisions that are made as bad decisions because they ultimately have been made under the shadow of Warzone being the boss.
Yes,
right.
100%. Yes, this is such a nuanced conversation, and I hate the way people talk about it. Everyone just wants to pull one way or another because it's the thing that everyone does nowadays. And it's so much more difficult to like talk about this than ever.
Yeah.
And everyone just wants to say, "Oh, Kevin doesn't care. Activision doesn't care." That's not the case. These developers, I know for a fact, care a crap ton about this game and this series. But at the same time, I brought this up during my Cold War video. I can love what they did. I can understand the circumstances that they're under. But at the same time, I can also rate it as such. Yeah. I can look at it as such. But I think so many people are just willing to say, "Oh, it's Warzone-ified. Bad game. Oh, it's not BO3. Bad game. Oh, they don't care."
Yeah.
I've never been to Treyarch. You have been. You can say it more than anybody. I know for a fact that these developers care more than anybody about this.
Yeah. The irony is that the devs, they actually truly do, like people say like blood, sweat, and tears, right? The Treyarch devs are dying.
Yes. Oh my God. I cannot imagine what they're going under at all times. It let me pull away my like criticisms of any of the games.
Yeah.
For God's sake, I thank you for trying, guys. Thank you so much for trying. I understand. Like I know Kevin Drew leaves Twitter sometimes because people are terrible. Please don't let that discourage you. You guys are doing an amazing job. I understand this is probably the hardest thing to do. Like imagine the worst job you've ever worked times 2, and the people you're working for don't even like you.
Yeah. It's not a job that I would ever say is easy, and I think people on the internet will say it's easy, and I think they make that mistake.
Yes.
And I think it's wrong to say that. For example, Liberty Falls does not look super stylized. In fact, it looks unstylized. It looks unseasoned. Does that mean that the devs are lazy? Crucially, no, it doesn't.
No.
It's just I think that there are broader decisions being made, and there are broader pieces in play, and I often refer to this in my videos as like the lumbering Activision machine, which is this massive architecture that is you almost can't point to a single person and say that's the Activision machine. It sort of doesn't work that way in some ways.
Oh my God.
But this lumbering beast is wandering sort of Goliath through the countryside towards this faint light in the distance, which is another $1 billion. And on its journey there, certain things fall off the machine. Certain things become less important. Certain things get crushed under its boot. And I think that the old style of zombies and many of the things that we fell in love with about zombies over the years have been victim to that falling by the wayside.
Yes.
But I don't think that means that the devs don't give a damn. I think in some instances, it could mean that the beast is going in that direction with such ferocity that the team then is like, okay, well, we're piloting the beast, so we're all driving in this direction. And that might then mean that they have certain blind spots to problems and needs and concerns that the zombies community has over here. And I think it's valid to say Treyarch is missing something here. Treyarch is not speaking to our interests. Treyarch is marketing this poorly. Treyarch is designing for a different archetype of player that's no longer me, and that sucks. All those things can be true. I just think that there's a little extra layer of nuance required, which is that I don't think Kevin Drew, because I've seen this a couple of times on Twitter recently, I don't think Kevin Drew hates the zombies community and is a lazy dev that only cares about making a game for his brother. I think that is just too reductive.
100%. Like I got called like the tweet that got us in this whole conversation that you really liked. I got called a rat for like saying like you just want the bare minimum. You're such a rat, and I'm like, whoa. I can be excited. I can still say the game is poorly made. I'm just an excited guy who likes zombies. I'm a sycophant, but that doesn't excuse it from. I like this from criticism. I like the idea that you said that everyone wants to point to one person. You've got Jimmy's run, Jason's run, Kevin's run, when that is almost the quite literal opposite from the truth. That like it is hundreds of people that work on these games that go into the music, the level layout, the overall production, the directing style, the writing, the animation, the gameplay, the weaponry. Zombies is almost non-conducive to what Call of Duty is. Yeah. At this point, it's just lucky that it built enough of a fan base when it started to not die off past 2015.
Yeah, so true.
I mean, you look at 2018 BO4, they put so much money into that, and I can't imagine Activision was just waiting to act this mode off and never look at it again after how poorly that failed, after how much money they put into it. Like, they probably wanted to murder every Zombies dev in that room.
Just like, get out of here, guys.
Get out of here. And, like, is that their fault? Is it the community's fault? That's a whole other conversation that's so incredibly nuanced and difficult to talk about.
Yeah, I've seen this on Twitter a bit recently, because there's been people saying, like, there was a tweet I saw the other day that said something along the lines of, people give too much credit to Jason and Jason's era of zombies and stuff like that. And I posed the question in response saying, is it wrong to attribute that period of time to Jason? Because I really see both sides of the coin on this. On the one hand, everything came across Jason's desk. Like, it just did. And
yeah.
Jason was the kind of director who was just so involved in the weeds of things in such a big way that, yes, I think it's fair to attribute the overall feel and the vibe and the cohesion of a game like Black Ops 3 to him. I don't think you can take that away from him, which I think some people want to do, but I don't think you can. Does that mean that there weren't hundreds of people putting things on his desk for him to approve? No, obviously those people were still there. They were still doing great work. They're still responsible for the art they created. But I kind of feel like I'm torn when people say, oh, well, you can't say it's like the Kevin Drew era because it's not. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, sure. Okay. Let's call it the Corky era then, really, if we want to draw the same comparison.
Yes.
And then I would say it is the Corky era in many ways. I don't think we can say, oh, just because it's a team effort doesn't mean that ultimately the buck doesn't stop with Corky. I think it does. And I think there's quite a lot of confusion about that just in general in the zombies community, where we want to be able to praise a map, but then when we try and find a target for the praise or a target for critique or whatever, it starts getting really nebulous because there's been different structures over the years. It's like, how do we map Jimmy starting as an animator in Nacht und Toten? And how do we then map that to like Jason coming in and doing directing stuff in Mob, and like and then with Kevin, like Kevin is not creative director. Like, he's associate design director, I'm pretty sure. So like there's differences to all of these things. They're not one-to-one comparable. I think it kind of makes the conversation a little tricky at times.
Yes, it does. And I think so many people want easy answers. Yeah. So many people just want to pick a person and lift them up and punch them down. And I think that's more just internet culture in general. That's more just our modern culture. Everyone wants to find easy solutions to every problem. And I think the mature part of being a Zombies fan is realizing that is most definitely not the case.
Yeah. So just on that point, let me just ask you, people want someone to lift up and then punch down, right?
Yep.
Do you think part of why Jason, overall, all things considered, do you think part of the reason why Jason is so respected is not actually because of the maps themselves or whatever, but do you think it's because he played the part of being someone that we could lift up and then punch down so well? Like, he was the figurehead, just categorically, in a way that Jimmy never was, and that Kevin Drew certainly never has been, and Corky will never be either, because as far as I'm concerned, Corky just doesn't like the limelight, which is fine. It's fair enough. It's not his job.
Yeah.
Do you think Jason like gets more points just from having been willing to be a bit more of a public personality?
100%. You look at Lee Ross, who did the exact same thing. You look at Cameron Dayton, who at least tried to do some of that. And I think he understood that's something the community wanted, that you need something to rally behind. Yeah. And I do think that's people are trying to apply that to Kevin, and that's just not the case.
Do you feel like it's
just not
be the
who
case?
He is?
In an ideal world, Wave of
In an
magic
ideal
wand.
world, yes, there should be someone designated for that at Treyarch. But at the same time, that person needs to be. They know they need to basically wear a armor vest wherever they go because they will be the target of just about everything. And I think Kevin was willing to do that, and then he kind of took it back for a while. He's like, "That's not a good idea." And I do think that also kind of pulls into the parasocial relationship between fans and Treyarch. As much of a good relationship that we have with them, I think it gets a little too close sometimes. It gets a little too heated. And I think... I'm not going to say Jason allowed that to happen, because that's something that you do with video games. You're supposed to do that. That's how you market the game. It's how you connect with an audience. But I think Kevin realized that, took a bit more of a step back, still communicated. He talked with John Rizzo a lot. He learned a lot from him and made adjustments to Cold War's gameplay. Rampage Inducer, health cap, weapon balancing. He talked a lot with the community during Cold War, but then after that, he took a step back because he knew that wasn't the smartest thing to do. And also doesn't help that leads to a lot of eyes on him now.
Yeah.
He's crossed the road of the road of no return, the point of no return.
He's crossed the Rubicon, if you will.
Yes, and that he's now stuck in that position where now everything in this run will be limelighted under him unless someone else comes up and says, "I'm the new Kevin Drew."
Yeah, it's weird. I met with Kevin maybe 4 years ago or something now. It's been a really long time, maybe 3 years ago.
Did you not see him at the Terminus event?
So yeah. But I'm referring to this was
cool.
Further back in time, I met up with him, and one of the points that I really tried to get across to him is the figurehead sort of position that Jason took in the zombies community. Whether or not you agree with Jason's design decisions, whether or not you like his maps, whether or not you think that the way he exited the company is a good thing or a bad thing or whatever, cast that all aside. I am of the opinion that him being perceivably leaned in and involved and rooting for us and fighting for us as he was immeasurably good for the zombies community.
Yes.
And there's been a vacuum since he left, and Kevin feasibly could step into that role or could elevate somebody else to be in that role with the community. I'm not saying it needs to be just a community manager, but there needs to be someone that feels like they have seniority in the company that is actually fighting for zombies' best interests, which is what it really felt like Jason was doing. And I think Kevin has done a little bit of that, don't get me wrong, but certainly in a very different way. And so I tried to sort of make the case to him, should you or somebody else do that at the studio, it would have such good ramifications for the way the community felt like it was being spoken to at all times, for the way that it felt like our voices were being treated, whether we were being heard or not heard. We'd really feel heard if there was somebody out there speaking our language, talking to us as peers almost, in the way that Jason kind of did. And he has done a little bit of that since then, Kevin, and he's also not done a little bit of that since then. He's kind of walked his own path, and that's fine. I would never say he has to do it one or the other, but
yes,
I think it's kind of it is a loss for the community overall, and it's kind of led to various narratives spiraling in a way that they wouldn't normally spiral.
Oh my god, yeah.
You agree?
Jason established why it was important, and then Kevin Drew is dealing with an impossible task that was basically forced upon him by the community, because the community really wants that, and he just might not want that, as like that might just not be something he thinks about as a developer.
Yeah, and
but Jason established why it's important.
And Kevin's busy, and I get that, and he's trying to design a game, and I get that. But again, if you're going to spend, let's say, $1 billion making a video game, and then another $1 billion marketing it, and one small tweak to that formula of like Kevin saying, okay, someone else on the team is going to be elevated into this position now, and that's going to be the person. If that's the sort of thing that is going to meaningfully impact $1 billion of marketing spend, then I feel like it's probably worthwhile.
Give yourself a fighting chance.
Yeah.
We know it works, so do it. And like, you know, you have like, who's their current community manager, if you know?
There's several people that handle the socials, and then there's the Reddit, and there's Foxy, and there's Ben Lewis, and there's a handful of people Yeah.
So I mean, then at that point, one of them's got maybe they got to hire someone to do zombies specifically. Maybe they got to hire someone to do it more. Maybe they got to just put someone in that role. Pick somebody because it's important. You got to find the right person for it, but you also got to do it at the same time. This is something that's pretty important to how this game works. Like Cold War was good. Vanguard and MWZ, we've gotten almost none of that. It's been radio silence.
So, with that said, you are the pessimist and I am the optimist. How do you feel overall about BO6's zombies marketing? What's the temperature?
Yes. Okay, I love the marketing. I think the marketing is really cool. I'm a big information guy. I love getting just information, absorbing it. I'm super big on spoilers. I will spoil myself to the high end.
Okay, interesting. Very weird, but cool.
Yeah. Well, because I would watch like your guys' videos. I would watch cutscenes before I did the Easter eggs. I had to see how it ended, and then I wanted to connect those pieces myself as I played the experience.
Okay. Yeah.
That's something. That's how I get engaged in media. Like I like looking at what's how does a movie, like if I'm interested in a movie idea, how does it end, and I gotta watch it now to see how it gets to that point. But I'm also very different.
So it's different to me. Whoa.
Yeah, I know. But that's different. Dude, that's different to most people, man.
Yeah.
I'm a special guy. Special in one way than another. But I like the marketing. I think it's cool. I just think the COD Next gameplay, I like it. I think I like seeing gameplay. I like getting comfortable with knowing what the game looks like, what it involves. I like getting excited. It has most definitely backfired for just about everyone else involved, though.
Do you feel like they should do the COD Next model again next year?
If they're gonna do it, you need to go all out. But they also should. I think the biggest thing is they need to do a zombies one. They need to invite zombies creators out. One of my biggest criticisms of the COD Next was you have 200 multiplayer Warzone guys, and you've got 2-3 zombies guys.
Yeah.
If you really want to show that you trust zombies, get a few more of those guys out there. Get MZC out there. Get you out there. Get Dalek and Noah out there. Get a bunch of the new guys too. Get Chopper, Tim Hansen. You got to get Shrevington out there. You got to get all these new people that are coming into the community.
Do you think it would have been better
if those people up too?
If it was Terminus, or would you have felt like that would have been spoiling the surprise?
That would have been spoiling the surprise, but let me ask you actually, do you think that would have spoiled the surprise?
Oh.
Since you played it, you don't have to say anything that you can't say, but do you think that would have spoiled some things if people had saw it?
Yeah, it's not so much stuff that I can't say, but more so. I feel like we had such a good month of zombies marketing, and
to end it off with.
I mean, Next
Liberty.
Next was the sort of first L in a month of W's.
Yes.
And so would I have preferred, for example, to swap it round so that I played Liberty Falls and then a month later they showed Terminus at COD Next? I think I probably would have preferred that, all things considered, because Next was more important as a beat because people were actually seeing it. But I think if I'd only played Liberty Falls at the preview event a month earlier, I would have come away and struggled to not make my Liberty Balls video regardless. I think that was sort of destined no matter what almost. So
just because of the way the map is, totally.
Yeah, I think so. And so is the swap of the two the solution? Maybe not. Does that mean that some other path is where like they only show Terminus, for example? I also think no, because if we only saw Terminus going into launch and then the game came out and Liberty Falls was as Liberty Falls is, people would have been so mad.
That might have been even a bigger meltdown. So I don't know I don't know what the right choice is here right now.
So my view is that the biggest problem of all is not what Liberty Falls looks like. It's not that it looks like Cold War. It's not the Warzone systems. It's once again Treyarch's biggest issue, which is poor expectation setting. And
they do a really bad job at that.
Yeah, and had they gone in to Next and said, okay, this is the zombies segment. It's going to be 30 minutes of gameplay. It's unfinished gameplay. You're only going to see the normal part of the map. And they could use very ambiguous language, right? They need not say, we're hiding the underground secret experimental bunker. They don't need to even go that far. nor do they need to show footage of it necessarily, but they just need to say, you are going to see just a slither of this map. Maybe they give us a percentage. Say it's 20% of the play space, right? So long as that ambiguity is there and they're making it abundantly clear that it's early and the, even the Easter eggs being turned off, right? They told us that, and that's fine, but we're zombies players, and we understand Easter eggs being turned off through one lens of how we talk about the game, but we don't necessarily know if Easter eggs being turned off means that when you spawn in, it's actually totally different, because in the map itself, the Easter egg is so intertwined with round one that they had to give us a different experience in Liberty Falls, for example, right? Or sorry, a different experience at Next. Like, we don't know what is or isn't off based on Easter eggs being turned off, because we have an understanding of what that means, but Treyarch has an understanding of what's actually in the game, right? So if they had come forward and said, Easter eggs are off, blah, blah, blah is locked, blah, blah, blah is shut off, that's going to mean that rounds 1 to 10 are missing a key detail which changes the experience completely. And it means that this endgame area is actually not going to transform in the way that it maybe it will do later on. You don't have to show it, but just give us a feeling that there is more there. And then I think combined with it,
do better.
Yeah, combined with it only having been 30 minutes of gameplay, which I think was also a mistake that they made. They should have limited it. That would have resulted in all of the content being, okay, this little slither looks kind of open and it's bright and stuff, but Treyarch themselves have told us there's 80% of the map undiscovered, and that there's going to be some kind of massive feature that we're missing that actually changes the experience, so we can't judge it just yet. Because they didn't do those things well enough, we're having to basically give benefit of the doubt that there's an underground area. But that's...
Yes, like, I have to hope that there's a Dark Aether section during the egg, because, like, I have nothing to go off of, but because I've basically seen everything. I have to pray that there's more that might not even be there.
Yeah, and so either it's pure copium, and the map's going to come out, and we're going to be disappointed again because our expectations have run away from themselves.
Because we set ourselves our own expectations. We're like, there has... Dude, Tog, Revelations, Transit, there has to be more. And then there isn't. And that's what gets a lot of people.
Yeah. So that, I think, is the key mistake with Next, is it's all framing, ultimately. And I think that boils back down to the fact that they don't have a zombies person to talk to us as zombies fans, and who knows what zombies fans would expect. And instead... You have people that are probably on the Activision team, not on the Treyarch team, but you probably have Activision PR people who are saying, we're going to show this part of the game, and overall it's mostly a multiplayer event, and like, they'll play zombies, and we'll just let them play zombies for like half an hour. Yeah, sure. And then Treyarch, separate to that, is going, oh, well, if they're playing zombies, we have to turn off the Easter eggs because we don't want to spoil our story. So Treyarch is sort of doing that thing to the side almost. But then the end result is this piece of meat being put on everyone's plate, and the meat's gray, and it's got no salt on it, and it's not even really cooked, and you're just like, wait, but that's like Wagyu beef, that's like premium steak that you're putting on my plate there, but there's just all these other circumstances that are making it unappetizing, and I think those circumstances are avoidable.
Yes. I don't think it helped that at the end of the Terminus gameplay, because Treyarch loves their games so much, they're so confident in them. They're like, Liberty Falls gameplay next. Everything's a 10 out of 10 to them, but that doesn't set very good expectations when you do that.
Yeah.
It shows confidence in yourself that you can do that and what you're making. That if you feel like everything you're making is a 10 out of 10, maybe they thought people would feel that. Nah, people. And you know what? The trailer got people super hyped. They didn't really limit the scope of what the gameplay would be, and that backfired badly.
So, on that note, even with all that stuff said, you're still a Liberty Falls enjoyer. And
I am. I'm excited, and I'll know 100% more when the game comes out.
Yeah, and right at the start of this, you said that you actually are in a place now where you prefer Weaver and Weaver's story and everything going on with him in the gap between Cold War and now. You prefer that and exploring that to Richtofen and exploring what's going on with Richtofen in Liberty Falls and thereafter. Just justify your opinion to me, please, because I'm so curious.
Yes, I'm super engrossed in the narrative of Cold War. I think the intel system as much as I love it, it wasn't done the best, but I read every piece of intel. I got super into Weaver's story, his connections with Samantha, with his connections with Richtofen, with his connections of being a CIA director, or not CIA director, I'm just handler. I was super engaged in his narrative, and I think they've really taken a character from Black Ops 1's campaign who didn't really get to do a whole lot, and they've just taken him and run with him. I've seen Richtofen's story for over 15 years now. And it's 15 years, wow. And
yeah. Terrifying.
Yes. And I'm just about, I think there's an interesting stuff that they can do with him in this game, but I've had my fill. Let's do something new. And Richtofen can be a side character in that narrative.
Wow, Richtofen can be a side character. That's fighting words right there.
Yeah, I know. I like Richtofen. He's one of my favorite characters, but actually Diego is. But I'm super engaged.
No, stop. What?
I love Diego, man. He's so bombastic. He's so intelligent. He's more than just a ladies' man. He's always like critically thinking. He sees stuff no one else sees. He can the shot in Ancient Evil where he's translating the Greek. And it says "Know thyself," and it translates in English for us to read. I think it's so cool. He's the one to pick up on the cult with their mask, not the poison doesn't affect them. He picks up on the Nidhogg being the Ivotan being the Nidhogg from the Tree of Yggdrasil during Voyage. He's so calculating. He wants to write an adventure series. He writes dime novels, but he's so much more intelligent than that. There's no depth. There's no depth to his character. But I just love that machismo, that absolute gung-ho energy. 1 second. Let me hold that thought.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I really respect the commitment to the Diego bit. That's incredible. I would never have thought that even possible. So fair enough, man.
I'm a big fan of his character. Anyways, back to what we were talking about though. Yeah. I think Weaver becomes super three-dimensional in Cold War, and I need to play as him. I need to see how this story continues. It's just something that's so engaging to me personally.
Wow. Okay. So when you saw the Terminus intro, you're probably losing your mind at that. The wall.
I was excited. Like yeah, I was excited to see all the characters interact. Peck's coming back. I like this crew. I like these characters. In my Cold War review, I brought up that the crew should have been these guys. So I was super excited to see them finally go through with it.
Do you think the Cold War story versus BO2 story, let's say, because you said that one was not like BO1, BO4 were like up there as your top game. So let's say BO2. Cold War story versus BO2 story. What do you prefer?
Probably Cold Wars. Cold Wars is a full fleshed out narrative. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. It's obvious with its mysteries. It wants you to get engaged, though. It's super surface level. That depends on who you are. I'm a big fan. I've been following zombies for 10 years, so I follow the whole narrative easily through. Yeah. I can tell you everything that there is to know about Transit Darius Buried, Mob of the Dead Origins. I'm of the belief that Origins should have just been a reset point, so that might also dictate my opinion too. Origins should have completely reset it, and you can reference stuff, but I think the story gets messy as you get into BO3, as much as I love BO3.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's part of its detriment. Is that whereas I think Cold War, they have a story that they want to tell. They're just so limited by the circumstances that they have, and I think they pull it off with enough interest that I'm engaged. I know most people aren't, but I am.
Okay.
I know for a lot of people they want to see Richtofen. That's their hook.
Yeah, I think I think also part of it is that they just don't want to know what Richtofen's going to do. Like, Cold War just felt so telegraphed to me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Like there's a fine line between foreshadowing and hand-holding and babying people. And I feel like Cold War was, personally, my read on it is that Cold War was exclusively the babying. And that...
Well...
go ahead.
Finish your thought, sorry.
Just that kind of alienated me a bit compared to the chaos of the old story that felt like it really pulled me in. I felt like I was pushed out by Cold War. Because
do you think that's because there's no mystery? There's nothing to latch on to until, like, basically right at the last minute, they pull you in with, like, Richtofen. Liberty Falls, they pull you in with his family. They pull you in with the fire, but there's not enough of that. There's not enough what's actually, like, we can kind of get a read on it.
Yeah, it's that, and it's also the fundamental, like, why do you care? I feel like in Cold War, part of the why you care is because you're just meant to care about private military corporations.
It doesn't help that you don't play as these guys. You don't get to like be them, and that's something I hate about Cold War.
Yeah.
These guys should have been the crew from the start, because no one can care about them if you can't play as them. They don't have any growth because they're just guys behind a computer.
Yeah, and
talking to a microphone.
Just on top of that, also just the sort of concept of a PMC as like a cool entity just doesn't resonate with me. Like I've never liked that in the COD campaigns. I don't like it in Modern Warfare Zombies. Like, okay, cool, more PMCs. I'm bored. And this goes for other games as well. Like in Borderlands, for instance, I don't care about all the weapons manufacturers. I don't care. Like, it's just not interesting to me. And the old story didn't need any of that, right? I didn't need PMCs to care about secret occult experimentation happening in Lower Silesia, right? So in that regard, that I think is where Cold War didn't fit for me. It's not just the lack of mystery, but it's then also the stuff that isn't mysterious is inherently dull in Cold War to me compared to the non-mysterious stuff in the past, which had inherent zing to it, which I feel like's been missing. So
100%. That's totally fair.
Black Ops 6 is the make or break, I suppose, because as you've said, it doesn't have those deal breakers and it doesn't have those hindrances and those friction points and those hurdles that Cold War experienced. And so if they can achieve what you've said, right, of like they've set table stakes here, if they can achieve a story that does have some mystery now and does start to get a bit more interesting, now that they've had budget and time, etc., hell yeah, maybe we'll all be back on board. But
yes,
my fear is that time was not the reason why PMCs were boring. PMCs being boring is the reason why PMCs are boring. That's my fear. Maybe I'm just too cynical, too skeptical. Remains to be seen, I suppose.
Yeah, these are super good points. I think that we're gonna find out, I suppose.
Yeah.
The Cold War was such a setup game, and everyone is sick of the setup now. You gotta pull an action plan on all of this.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, this is the make or break. You've set it up. You've run out of runway. Start to get ready to fly, or plane's going down. So we're gonna find out.
So it's been lovely talking today. For folks listening, where can they find you? I'll put your links in the description. Let's just do that. That makes life
absolutely.
life easier.
You can find me at Stanley557. I make multi-hour long videos, and I talk way too much about Call of Duty Zombies because I can analyze this series probably better than anybody. So.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, great to talk to you today. And hopefully this has been some interesting food for thought for everyone listening as well. And you guys are just going to have to come back once the game's out and before, but once the game's out to see where it sort of landed on our little scale.